And good morning. You're listening to Screen Reflections. This is your host, Michael Bergeron, and you're listening to KPFT. And today we have a very special guest from London, Pascal Bergamin. Pascal, you are the director of Portraits of Dangerous Women, and it is a film that is now available in North America via streaming. I found this to be a very kind of old-fashioned comedy, a movie about nonconformity. Could you tell me a little bit about your approach to directing and how this movie came about?
I think you're right that, there is kind of a very timeless kind of feel to the film. We sort of wanted to create a world that is recognizable. I mean, it's set in English countryside, and yet it's not quite locatable. In terms of my approach, my main goal is always to create a space where no one feels rushed. And to make that possible, we kept the crew very small. That helped cut down the technical noise around filming and gave us more time to focus on the scenes. And we had rehearsal time, which made a big difference. 3 days in total, which for an independent film is actually quite a lot. And it gave us a chance to explore the tone and rhythm before stepping on set, and that was really important. And with a film that relies on nuance as much as Portraits of Dangerous Women does, you don't want to figure out the basics on set. You want the space to fine-tune, to adjust the pacing of a moment or let a glance land differently. I describe the atmosphere as very focused but relaxed enough that people could offer something unexpected without feeling pressured to just get the film done.
And I kind of caught this vibe, the quirky films of Bill Forsyth, who was very well known, with independent films and British films, 20, 30 years ago. Am I off track on that, or was that kind of an influence?
You are not off track at all. It wasn't an influence. Of course, I'm aware of his films and I've watched his films, but we didn't use it as a reference. I always find that when you make a film or when you're financing a film, people always want to know, what is this film going to look like? What is it going to feel like? And so you kind of use references, but as I say, I tend not to do that also in communicating with the crew, because sometimes that can also be dangerous. And of course, you sort of want to create your own film as an artist. You want to create your own world. So the references often feel like a shortcut that might be a bit too easy.
There's some amazing performers in this film. I think American audiences will be most familiar with Tara Fitzgerald from films like Sirens and Brassed Off. But you've also got Mark Lewis Jones, Jenny Spark, Yasmin Monet Prince. Can you talk about how you cast this film?
We worked with a fantastic casting director, Matilda James, and putting the right cast together was quite a slow but careful process. It took a few months because I knew the film would sort of stand or fall with the cast. It's not the kind of story where you can rely on a clear, gripping plot to pull the audience along. It has a different quality to it, but thankfully I would say a quality that speaks to actors, or maybe it was just different enough from what they usually get offered. And given the tight budget and the caliber of actors we wanted to attract, we didn't hold auditions. So we made straight offers. We approached each actor directly and said, okay, we'd love you to play this role, and here's why we think you'd be great in it. And if they connected with the script, they usually ask for a meeting with me where I could explain my vision and how I'd like to work. So it was kind of the other way around. We didn't audition the actors, but the actors, once they agreed to talk to me, sort of auditioned me as a director. Looking back, none of those casting choices are obvious. But in my opinion, they really work together as an ensemble. And I think that's because they really understood the project or script, and because Matilda, the casting director, helped create a sense of trust that this could work. I mean, they're very well-known actors in this country, and I'm no household name. And I hadn't quite made anything quite like this before. So from my point of view, everyone had good reason to be nervous, but they weren't. They were very generous and trusting and willing to give it their all, really, and to be part of the film in a way that felt very open and collaborative.
And this is Screen Reflections. This is your host, Michael Bergeron. We're talking to Pascal Bergamin, the director of Portraits of Dangerous Women. Tell me about some of the films that influenced you to become a filmmaker.
I'd say mostly films I didn't quite understand at first. Sometimes even films that irritated me or left me at a loss or moved me in unexpected ways. I grew up in a small town in Switzerland, but we did have a cinema that would occasionally show, less commercial or mainstream films. Of course, I watched the mainstream ones too and enjoyed them like everyone else, but they didn't spark that feeling of, I want to make films. To give you an example, I remember watching Nobody Knows, the Japanese film, and thinking, wow, what's this? It's slow, it's tender, it's different, but it really moved me at a very young age. And I also remember going to see something like Eyes Wide Shut, walking out completely lost. I had no idea what to make of it. I was maybe 19, so I was old enough to see it, but not old enough to really grasp what the film was trying to say. So there are dozens, probably hundreds of examples I could mention, films from all corners of the world, but in short, it's the ones that stuck with me were the ones I had to sit with for a while. And then I saw the first Dogme films, the Danish movement from the mid-90s, with those infamous rules, no additional lighting, no added music, no props or sets.
Sure, like Celebration.
Everything shot on location. Yes, exactly. And it wasn't so much the films themselves that excited me, although I liked them, but the idea that this way of working could be taken seriously and end up in a cinema. I was making films that way out of necessity on a small DV camera, no budget, just using natural light. When I saw someone doing it by choice, getting into festivals and cinemas with it, I thought, well, maybe I can do this too. I think the way big Hollywood films were made seemed totally out of reach and so far away. But these smaller films from all over, not just the Dogme movement, but, also American indie films from the 90s, they made it feel possible somehow. And that was incredibly encouraging and inspiring at the same time.
The film is Portraits of Dangerous Women, and it's currently streaming on major platforms in North America. I guess that would include like Amazon and Apple TV. How hard was it to get a deal for distribution? How hard is it for any filmmaker trying to make waves?
It's very difficult to get a film seen these days. We live in a time of abundance and, everything is available at any moment at the press of a button. Cutting through that noise, that's the real challenge, especially when you're trying to cut through the noise with a very quiet film like Portraits of Dangerous Women. I'll be grateful and proud that we managed to get distribution in North America. And I'd say making a film is one thing, but getting it out into the world can be just as much, if not more work, especially if you've made something that strays slightly from the norm. And distribution has changed, and it's still changing, every year, every month, every day. And that can be exhausting for filmmakers. So in my opinion, the real challenge now is finding the right distribution partners and people who not only help you get the film onto platforms, but who also help you actually find your audience once it's on those platforms.
Pascal, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Michael, for having me on your show. It's been a pleasure.